22 years after the return of Hong Kong to China, the U.S. is increasing its criticism of Beijing's governance of the territory, which was swiftly rejected by the Chinese authorities. In a report released last week, the U.S. State Department says Hong Kong brings so-called significant benefits to the U.S. economy and homeland security, but criticized Beijing for its, and I quote, intervention in Hong Kong's affairs and for so-called accelerating negative trends there. However, Chinese Foreign Ministry rejected the accusation, saying Hong Kong affairs are purely China's domestic affairs. No foreign government has the right to interfere. A top Hong Kong official also chided the U.S. for not understanding how Hong Kong's internal affairs work, reminding Washington that Hong Kong is part of China. Is Hong Kong becoming a new source of tension in Sino-U.S. relations? Joining me in the studio in Beijing is Zhao Hai, a research fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. From Hong Kong, Andrew Leung, an independent China strategist, and from New York, Reifowitz, a history professor at S.U.N.Y Empire State College. Before we go to the discussion, let's first take a look to what Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Geng Shuang said one day after the release of this report.
I want to stress that Hong Kong is a special administrative region of China, and Hong Kong affairs are purely China's domestic affairs. No foreign government has the right to interfere. The U.S. report finds fault with Hong Kong affairs and wantonly criticizes China's central government and the Hong Kong SAR government in disregard of facts. We deplore and stand resolutely against it and urge the U.S. to stop such erroneous practice and be prudent with its words and deeds on matters relating to Hong Kong.
Okay, gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Zhao Hai, let me go to you first. What do you read as the starting point, the motivation behind the U.S.'s report, especially in the shifting of tone in this year's report compared to last year? As we know, last year they said that Hong Kong generally maintained a high degree of autonomy on their one country and two system framework. However, this year they said that there is a sufficient, although diminished, degree of autonomy. What do you make of the change of tone here?
Well, as we know, since 1992, the United States has been putting out this kind of reports on Hong Kong. And for the past decades, the United States has maintained a relatively stable view of Hong Kong. And even though from time to time U.S. criticized China's behavior, it does not say that obviously. And during this time, because U.S.-China's overall strategic relationship are strained, I think this year there's a sudden change of tone. In this new report, the U.S. has accused China of various things of interference in Hong Kong's internal affairs. I think this is really a double standard and really hypocritical coming from the U.S. because the U.S. has recently, particularly from Vice President Pence, accusing China of interfering in U.S. Domestic politics. And now the U.S. actually, from its government perspective, are openly interfering in China's domestic politics. So I think using Hong Kong as a kind of instrument to pressure China is probably new thinking from Washington, D.C., and I don't think it's going to work.
Andrew, how do you look at this report? Although it's been published since 1992, this year the tone shifts, but the point is, do they have the qualification, do they have the right to publish such a report, to single out the U.S.'s relation with a region of China, which is a part of China and China's internal affairs?
Well, Hong Kong being an international city, and there are many foreign businesses operating in Hong Kong, and so it's naturally other countries would look at the situation in Hong Kong with great interest. I mean, this is understandable. But on the other hand, the tone, as the other guest, interview guest was saying, has dramatically changed. I think that this reflects a 360 degrees pushback by the United States against the rising China. You can see that happening on trade, the trade war, on technology, the technology war with Huawei, over the South China Sea, more frequent so-called freedom of navigation operations over Taiwan, supplying making the supply of ammunition to Taiwan as a regular feature, highlighting what the U.S. perceives as transgressions in Xinjiang, and also playing the Hong Kong card. So I think that this is a dramatic change as the United States sees its global dominance being eclipsed by rising China.
Professor Reifowitz, how do you look at the explanation of Mr. Leung in Hong Kong? I mean, we can understand if the United States see China as a strategic competitor or rival and wants to compete with China or contain China or not see China as peaceful rise, and yet to use every possible occasion, every possible subject to bash China, to criticize China. Is that sensible? Is that how you see this report as well?
Well, first of all, countries that are competitors in the world are going to look to gain advantage over one another. That's how the world works. This is an interesting law because what the Hong Kong law allows for is that Hong Kong and its residents are given essentially separate treatment under U.S. law from those who are in the rest of China. And they're given that separate treatment because Hong Kong, as you know, is considered under one country, two systems. So what the report has to do every year is to verify whether or not it still exists, the one country, two systems setup. If it's no longer one country, two systems, then Hong Kong just gets treated like the rest of China does, which is not necessarily fair or unfair. It just would mean it would no longer get that special treatment.
Let's talk a little bit about what the report said about growing political restrictions in Hong Kong, maybe straining the confidence of the international business community. This is the finding of the report, and yet, according to another US-based foundation that's called Heritage, Hong Kong actually ranks as the world's #1 in terms of freedom of its economy, and it has been like that at least since 2018. World's #1. Let's not get that mistake. So, Ian, how do you explain that? I mean, obviously, we have a very contradicting description of the situation in these two findings.
Well, they're looking at two different things. Oh, I'm sorry. They're looking at two different things, right? The Heritage Report is looking at economic freedom, and the State Department report is looking at political freedom. Certainly, you can have a country or a government that allows for economic freedom.
But the U.S. report is saying that government report is saying that this situation in Hong Kong may be straining the confidence of the international business community. Obviously, that does not seem to be the case. And let me go to Zhao Hai here. How do you see the possibility that Hong Kong, if it is such a bad place or such a place without any political autonomy for the local Hong Kong people, how can it maintain such a high level of economic vitality and freedom?
Well, let's first look at the report put out by the United States, because in the conclusion, the U.S. Actually said that there's sufficient evidence to actually continue the special treatment of Hong Kong SAR. So I think overall, even though they have some evidence saying that China is interfering or limiting political freedom in Hong Kong, but there's still enough evidence to support that Hong Kong is still free in terms of economic and political. And also, we have to distinguish the two. One is that Hong Kong is under one country, two system. And the two system in terms of political freedom, actually after China take over Hong Kong, the political freedom actually improved than compared to the colonial period. And the other thing is what the other panelists talk about, Americans' pursuit of political freedom, which is a two different thing. And also, when some people in Hong Kong challenge one country, challenge the sovereignty of China, and that is in the very nature challenging the one country, two system from the first place. So I think overall we have to distinguish the difference here.
Yeah, a top official of Hong Kong actually said that this report is very biased and that many Western countries are using their values to look at Hong Kong affairs without understanding how Hong Kong's internal system works, and misunderstanding that the autonomous level of Hong Kong decreasing. Andrew, how do you understand his conclusion here?
I think that the one country, two system is in fact a great paradox. I mean, you have a one country with a different political system. You have the two systems which has been governed under very, very different political and economic system. So how to make the two gel is in fact a great challenge. But I think that I lived through all these years before and after the handover. And immediately after the handover, in fact, a couple of months after the handover, it was very, very difficult to continue even organizing a football game between, for example, the police authorities on the two sides. Before, all it took was just a telephone call. But afterwards, everything has got to be elevated to Beijing. That was a time when it was possible to separate the so-called well water and river water, which is a very, very kind of popular saying, you know, which the two places can be entirely separated. But this is no longer possible. I mean, the two places are increasingly integrated economically. There's bound to be kind of backlash, even the kind of culture, people visiting, a great deal of number of Chinese tourists. And of course, the challenge of the one country, the sovereignty. I mean, for example, finding a party, a political party which can field a candidate in the Hong Kong's Legislative Council, and the party is called Independence Party. Of course, this is absolutely treading on the red lines of the one country. But to say that this is an erosion of Hong Kong's political freedom, I think it's just going too far, because in Hong Kong, there are all sorts of publications being, you can see it every day, criticizing the Beijing government, criticizing the Hong Kong government. And in fact, the Apple Daily, for example, is very, very famous for a kind of anti-Beijing kind of thing. So this is still allowed to happen. Okay. But that doesn't mean that there is no freedom in Hong Kong. In fact, the freedom, as pointed out earlier, in fact, is a great improvement before the handover.
Yeah. Well, Ian, I always trusted and appreciated your participation in the show from a very objective and academic point of view. How do you see the potential consequences of Hong Kong affairs being used as some kind of card against Beijing in U.S.'s competition to keep its dominance?
Right. I don't see that the government in Beijing is going to be significantly influenced by how the U.S. assesses Hong Kong's autonomy. The Chinese economy is so large and so dynamic that the way the U.S. treats Hong Kong, I just don't see that they would allow the government in Beijing would not allow that to change their approach to Hong Kong.
Zhao Hai, what will be the consequence seen from Beijing here?
This is a small.
Yeah, let me get the Beijing perspective, the Chinese perspective here.
I think the Washington is applying some kind of a gray zone policy here in the Taiwan issue, in South China Sea issue, and now in Hong Kong. They understand the red line, and they don't want to tread or step over the red line. However, above the red line, they still play some kind of game, trying to apply pressure on China and trying to use that as a bargaining chip to push China around. And I think at some point, if you accumulate that together, it's going to be very dangerous, because that will alienate the two parties and make the strategic trust even less.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks to Zhao Hai, a research fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences from Hong Kong, and Leung, an independent China strategist, and from New York, Reifowitz, a history professor at S.U.N.Y Empire State College.